Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When the HOA tried to fence off a Texas driveway, they didn't count on one grizzled grandpa, a rusting front loader, and a grandson with a camera. What began with a pile of gravel sparked a viral rebellion, and the quiet war for one family's land turned into a legend. After the funeral, I didn't have to think long about where I'd go. There wasn't anything left for me in Dallas except an overpriced apartment and an IT job that didn't care if I coded from a desk or a barn. So I packed what I could fit into my truck and drove south, past the city limits, into the kind of rural Texas where the roads stop having names and start having reputations. 12 acres of dirt, rust, and memory. That's what Grandpa Frank called it. But to me, it was home. It always had been, even when I was just a kid visiting on weekends. The house leaned a little more than I remembered, the barn smelled like oil and dead snakes, and the gate creaked like it was in pain. But when Grandpa saw me step out of the truck, he didn't say a word, just nodded once and handed me a beer. That's how he said, "Welcome back." Frank Harper was 78, a retired trucker who'd driven more miles in reverse than most men do forward. He didn't sugarcoat things. Never had. He raised me after my parents died in a car wreck when I was 10, taught me how to weld before I learned algebra, and cursed the government before I ever paid taxes. Now, after years apart, I was back where I started, trying to repay a man who never asked for anything but respect and clean tools. The land hadn't changed much. Scrub grass, a busted tractor, pecan trees older than sin. The one thing that had changed, though, was the neighborhood. Or, more accurately, the little HOA kingdom that had sprouted up like mold on the edge of our property. Vista Springs. Gated, landscaped, full of people who wore pastels and treated dogs better than humans. They showed up about 5 years ago, trying to buy surrounding plots and elevate the community. Grandpa told them to take their brochures and shove them somewhere brochures weren't meant to go. They backed off, but not before trying to slap HOA jurisdiction over our private road. Didn't work. He kept every legal document since 1964 in a metal cabinet that weighed more than a cow. We had proof that the entry road, even the stretch Vista Springs liked to claim, was ours. And yet, just last week, a new brochure had shown up in the mailbox. Vista Springs welcomes you. Learn about the benefits of membership. Grandpa had laughed so hard he choked on his coffee. Later that night, sitting on the porch under a sky full of stars and mosquitoes, he said something that stuck with me. You can't fix greedy with polite. You gotta show it where the line is and then dare it to cross. I wasn't sure what he meant then. I would soon enough. The first letter came on a Monday. Tidy white envelope, Vista Springs logo in gold foil at the corner, like it was an invitation to a charity gala instead of a threat. I opened it at the kitchen table while Grandpa scraped burnt eggs off the skillet, like they owed him money. It was addressed to resident of parcel number 143B, which was already wrong. We weren't part of any numbered development. Inside was a typed notice filled with legal fluff and fake courtesy. It has come to the board's attention that your property currently utilizes access via a Vista Springs-owned easement. Continued use without proper registration and payment constitutes a violation of community policy. They wanted a monthly access fee, retroactive fines, and an invitation to a compliance hearing. I read it twice, then once more out loud. Grandpa didn't blink. He just muttered, "They're fishing," and reached for the Tabasco. I sent back a letter the next day, registered mail with photocopies of our deed, the 1964 easement agreement, and the county's jurisdictional map. I used highlighter. I even added a sticky note that said, "Please stop this nonsense." A week later, a second letter arrived, harsher tone this time. This one accused us of non-compliance with vehicular policy, which sounded like something from a parking garage in hell. They gave us 30 days to begin payments, or alternative access may be enforced. I laughed. Grandpa didn't. "They're setting the stage," he said, squinting at the paper. "First come the fake bills. Next come the threats. Then they block the road." I asked if we should contact a lawyer. He shook his head. "Not yet. Let them show their hand." The next few days, the tension settled in like humidity. Folks from the neighborhood started acting strange. Our closest neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, suddenly avoided eye contact when I waved from the fence line. One woman from Vista Springs stopped her SUV at the edge of our drive, stared for a while, then sped off like we'd pointed a shotgun at her. Word was spreading. Not the truth, of course. Whatever version the HOA was selling. Probably that we were freeloaders, or that Grandpa was some squatter holding up development. We didn't care much what people thought, but when someone starts softening up the neighborhood, you know they're planning something. One afternoon, I walked out to find a laminated flyer stapled to our fence post. Vista Springs Access Policy Reminder. All parcels must comply by June 1st. It wasn't signed. It wasn't legal, but it was bold. I took it down, folded it neatly, and pinned it to the fridge like a trophy. We didn't respond to the second letter. We didn't answer their emails, but I did install a camera at the gate. Grandpa started keeping a thermos and a loaded nail gun in the truck bed. He didn't say much, just tightened his jaw and said, "We'll see what they try next." Turns out, we wouldn't have to wait long. It was just past 5 in the morning when I heard the engine. Not a regular engine either. This one had that low, angry diesel growl, the kind that means something big and heavy is moving where it shouldn't. I was already up, brewing coffee in the kitchen. Grandpa was in his chair on the porch, wrapped in a quilt and watching the horizon like he expected trouble to come out of it. I stepped outside, mug in hand, just in time to see a dump truck roll slowly down the easement road. Our road. It had Vista Springs HOA Maintenance stenciled across the driver door in crooked vinyl letters. It crept to a stop just before the fork where our private drive splits off, reversed, and then, with no hesitation, dumped its full load of gravel right across our only vehicle path. Gray rock poured out like an avalanche, a 6-foot mound blocking the entire drive from the fence post to the ditch. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was surgical. You couldn't walk around it without crawling through brush or barbed wire, and you definitely weren't getting a truck over it. Then came the kicker, a laminated sign on a stake, planted dead center in the gravel pile. Bold black text read, "No access, private road, HOA enforcement, pending compliance." I blinked. Grandpa sipped his coffee. "Anything worth doing is worth overdoing," he muttered. This is overdoing stupid. I grabbed my phone, started filming. The dump truck driver didn't even look at us. He just rolled back down the road like he was delivering flowers, not a blockade. I caught the plate number anyway, just in case. Grandpa leaned on the railing and gave a low whistle. "You know what this means, don't you?" I asked. "Oh yeah," he said. "Means they're real damn scared. When people know they're wrong but still want to win, they go for shock and awe." I posted the footage online, just a short clip. No commentary, no threats. Titled it, "When the HOA Thinks They Own Texas." It got picked up fast. My inbox started filling with messages, support, legal advice, a couple of memes featuring dump trucks labeled Vista Karen Delivery Service. We tried calling the HOA office, but the line went straight to voicemail. I emailed 3 board members directly. Nothing. No one returned our messages, but we knew someone had seen the video because within an hour of posting, the Vista Springs residents Facebook group went private. The walls were going up, metaphorically and literally. Around noon, Mr. Rodriguez walked over with a paper bag of tamales and a sheepish look. He muttered something about how he didn't agree with the board's methods, but didn't want to get involved. Grandpa just thanked him for the food and said, "A man who sits on a fence long enough gets splinters in his soul." By sunset, I had a drone flying over the property, and Grandpa was parked by the gravel with a lawn chair and a loaded water pistol for pest deterrence, he claimed. We weren't going anywhere. Not yet, but they sure as hell made their move. And soon, it would be our turn. Grandpa didn't say much the next morning. He just sat at the kitchen table with his coffee, staring at the gravel pile through the window, like it had personally insulted his mother. I made us both breakfast, eggs, toast, bacon so crispy it shattered, and he didn't touch any of it. When a man like Frank Harper skips bacon, something's brewing. Then without a word, he stood up, grabbed his keys, and disappeared into the barn. The barn hadn't been opened in years. It still smelled like diesel and tobacco spit, and a dozen wasp nests clung to the rafters like angry decorations. But buried under 2 decades of tarp and dust was the old case front-end loader Grandpa had used back when he baled hay and hauled junk for side cash. Bright orange paint flaked like sunburned skin. The tires were flat. The battery was long dead. Didn't matter. By noon, he had it jacked up, aired, fueled, and rumbling like a pissed-off dragon. "I thought we were going to call a lawyer," I said, watching him strap a GoPro to his welding helmet. "We will," he replied, tightening the last bolt. "But first, I'm returning a delivery." I followed him down the gravel path as the front loader rolled out like a tank headed for battle. I had half a mind to stop him, but I'd also seen what happens when you try to get between my grandfather and a bad idea he thinks is righteous. We drove slow and steady 2 miles down the road to the Vista Springs clubhouse. It sat behind a manicured gate with fake stone columns and a decorative fountain that hadn't worked since last summer. Their HOA office was attached to the clubhouse, with parking reserved for board members only. There were 5 cars that morning, 2 sedans, a pristine BMW with a vanity plate that said HOQueen, and a Tesla. Grandpa pulled in like he belonged there, rolled the loader straight up to the center of the lot, and didn't say a word. He just shifted into gear and began to unload. Shovelful by shovelful, he returned every damn rock on hoods, roofs, windshields. He didn't slam them. He was slow, deliberate, precise. Not one dent. Just a 6-foot mound redistributed across their precious lot. The BMW got the lion's share. On its hood, he stuck a little wooden sign that read, "Your rules, your rocks." A couple of residents came out, phones in hand, recording, murmuring in disbelief. One woman shrieked, "That's vandalism!" Grandpa turned and said, calm as iced tea, "Only if I scratch the paint, sweetheart. So far, I'm just tidying up." I filmed the whole thing on my phone. Couldn't help it. It was the kind of thing you watch and realize you're witnessing either the start of a lawsuit or a legend. By the time he was done, there was no gravel left in our driveway. Grandpa climbed down, tipped his imaginary cowboy hat to the stunned audience, and drove off like it was just another day hauling feed. The video hit TikTok before we even got home. By sundown, it had 2 million views, trending under Sombrier's gravel justice. Local news picked it up the next day. Texas grandpa dumps HOA's gravel back where it came from. I didn't even post it to Facebook. Someone else did. The comments were glorious. That man is a national treasure. This is the energy I want in my life. Where do I send him a beer? I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt the tension tighten. Because if I knew anything about people like the Vista Springs board, especially Queen Karen and her little kingdom, it's that they never take being embarrassed well. And this was gonna burn. The cruiser pulled up just after noon. Not speeding, not sirens blazing, just that steady roll of government tires crunching gravel with the kind of finality that says, we're here to make this someone's problem. I was already outside when they came. Grandpa was polishing a crescent wrench for no reason other than to look busy and annoyed. The deputies stepped out, 2 of them. One was a younger guy with a sunburn and wraparound shades. The other was older, buzz cut, the kind of cop who's seen more dumb in a week than most see in a year. "Afternoon," the older one said, glancing between me and Grandpa. "You James Harper?" "That's me," I said, nodding. He didn't reach for cuffs, didn't even pull out a notepad, just gave a tired sigh and said, "You want to tell us what the hell's going on with a front loader and a bunch of HOA cars covered in gravel?" I nodded toward the porch. "We got coffee and video footage. You want to see both?" They followed me inside. I pulled up the security cam from the front gate first. 5:13 a.m., time-stamped and clear as day, showing the Vista Springs maintenance truck backing up and dumping gravel across our only exit. The younger cop raised his eyebrows. The older one leaned in. "All right," he muttered. "Well, that's pretty damn blatant." "Keep watching," I said. I showed them the GoPro footage from Grandpa's little field trip. It had everything: slow, methodical dumping, careful placement, no scratches, no property damage. The closest he came to aggression was tapping the BMW's hood with a glove to knock off a pebble. The younger deputy smirked. "That him in the welding helmet?" "Yep," I said. "That thing's got more views than my wedding video." "Mine too," Grandpa added from the doorway. "And mine had cake." They laughed. It wasn't official, but I could tell right then. These weren't the kind of cops itching to throw cuffs on an old man who returned trash to sender. Still, the older one kept his tone measured. "Look, HOA claims vandalism and intimidation. Says your grandfather made verbal threats and damaged private property." "You got evidence of that?" I asked. "Not really," he admitted. "All they gave us was a Facebook post and a couple blurry phone vids that show your guy driving a loader. Nothing aggressive, no audio." "Well, that's because there was nothing," I said. "They blocked our drive illegally. We returned what was ours, peacefully." "Looks like it," he said. "From what I see here, this is a civil matter. No arrest. But I wouldn't be surprised if they pushed this into court." "We're ready," I told him. The deputies left without incident. No tickets. No warnings. Just a promise to file a report and a not-so-subtle chuckle from the younger one as he passed the gravel-free driveway. But HOA wasn't done. Not even close. By evening, local media had picked up the body cam footage from the cops and blurred versions of my security videos. That, plus Grandpa's TikTok fame, was gasoline on a fire. But it was the Vista Springs official statement that really twisted the knife. It read, "We regret the escalation initiated by the residents of the Harper property who chose confrontation and destruction over dialogue. Vista Springs will pursue legal action to protect the peace and safety of our community. They made us sound like domestic terrorists." By the next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Neighborhood grandpa turns heavy machinery on HOA. Driveway dispute goes full Mad Max. Gravel warfare in small-town Texas. Grandpa didn't say much, just poured his coffee, stared at the empty patch where the gravel used to be, and muttered, "They really want to play rough." He glanced at me, eyes sharper than a switchblade. "Fine, let's play." By the end of that week, I'd spoken to 4 different attorneys, 3 of whom either laughed nervously or flat out refused to get involved once they heard the words Vista Springs HOA. Apparently, the board had a reputation, not just for pettiness, but for weaponizing bureaucracy like it was their God-given purpose. The 4th lawyer, though, was different. Linda Garcia, late 30s, wore boots to meetings and had a scar on her hand from a chainsaw accident she refused to explain. She'd sued 2 HOAs into bankruptcy and once got a city councilman disbarred for zoning fraud. When I showed her the footage, the documents, and the HOA's access fee letters, she didn't flinch. She just asked, "You want revenge or resolution?" "Both," I said. "Good," she replied. "Then you came to the right mean bitch." We started that afternoon. First, Linda drafted a cease and desist letter demanding HOA immediately retract their access threats and acknowledge our right-of-way, as recorded in the 1964 easement. Second, she filed a civil complaint for obstruction of access, endangerment of a disabled individual, Frank, with his heart condition and VA documentation, and defamation stemming from the HOA's public statements. And third, she prepared a counter-lawsuit for $150,000 in damages, including cost of remediation, legal fees, and emotional distress. But that was just the opening salvo. Linda had a contact in the county recorder's office, an overworked, underpaid archivist named Rob who owed her a favor from some zoning case in Austin. She asked him to dig up any recent map amendments or easement alterations submitted by Vista Springs in the last 6 months. What he found made her grin like a dog seeing steak. Turns out, 2 months prior, Vista Springs HOA had filed a proposed revision to the zoning map of our area. In it, they had redrawn their community boundaries to include the portion of the road that crossed into our land, labeling it a shared access corridor. The application was submitted with a digital signature, supposedly from James Harper, resident. "I never signed a damn thing." Linda's voice went cold. "They forged your name. This isn't just harassment now, it's criminal. And they did it to stake legal claim on land they don't own." She filed a motion to initiate a fraud investigation attached to the civil complaint. We sent all of this with evidence to the county prosecutor's office. Then we gave copies to the local paper, which had been sniffing around ever since the gravel incident. By Saturday, the Hill County Tribune ran a front-page story. HOA caught altering zoning records in driveway dispute. Subheadline, attorney alleges forged documents, endangerment of elderly resident. The fallout came fast. Reporters showed up outside the Vista Springs clubhouse. Karen, the president, and yes, the same woman whose BMW got a gravel bath, issued a shaky statement about misunderstandings and process errors. Online, the HOA's reputation collapsed. Neighbors started emailing us privately with apologies, some even asking if they could contribute to our legal fund. We didn't need their money, we needed their silence, and maybe their sworn statements when the subpoenas started flying. Frank didn't say much about the lawsuits. He wasn't a court kind of guy, but I did catch him late that night, sitting on the porch, polishing an old pocket knife and grinning at the moon. "They tried to bury us in rock," he said. "Didn't realize we had a shovel in the law." And for the first time in weeks, I actually believed we might win. By the time Monday rolled around, Vista Springs looked less like a community and more like a crime scene in slow motion. HOA meetings were suddenly members only. Their public Facebook page vanished overnight, and Karen's car disappeared from her driveway. The BMW was still under gravel in every meme, but the real one, gone. Linda told me not to get cocky. "Cornered rats get teeth," she said, packing up another folder of subpoenas, "and rats with legal budgets bite harder." The real break came from an unlikely place. A former board member named Don Ellis. Late 60s, wore bolo ties and walked with a limp. He called me one evening from a blocked number, said, "You don't know me, but I quit the board last year. I got something you'll want to see." He wasn't wrong. We met at a diner off Highway 77. Don brought a manila envelope filled with photocopies, emails, and internal memos from when he served under Karen. Most of it read like HOA trivia, meeting notes, vendor invoices, complaints about mailbox colors. But one email stood out. It was from Karen to the rest of the board, dated 3 weeks before the gravel dump. "If we want to maintain control over the lower road, we need to include it in the next parcel update. James Harper is not compliant and shows no intention to join the HOA voluntarily. I suggest we proceed with map integration using implied consent. As long as no one objects formally, the county will process it." Implied consent for property they didn't own. Linda nearly ripped the page in half when she read it. We brought the files to the county attorney's office the next morning. This time, we weren't handed off to an assistant or told to submit a form. The assistant DA himself came out, shook our hands, and said, "We've been watching Vista Springs for a while. You might have just given us the nail." That same afternoon, a formal investigation was opened into potential zoning fraud, document forgery, and abuse of municipal process by the Vista Springs HOA board. The DA's office contacted the County Planning Commission, which had already received multiple complaints about suspicious amendments in HOA filings. The next day, the commission called an emergency hearing. And somehow, Linda got us seats in the front row. Karen showed up in a cream pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, flanked by 2 lawyers who looked like they billed in 6-minute increments. She refused to look at us. Her face had the tight, controlled expression of someone who knows the cameras are rolling and the walls are caving in. The hearing was brutal. The commission's investigator laid it all out. How the HOA had submitted altered parcel maps, how signatures didn't match previous filings, and how one zoning clerk had been pressured to rush approval on several of those documents by none other than Kevin Blake, HOA board treasurer. Kevin, who just so happened to own a real estate investment firm that bought homes from motivated sellers, like, say, homeowners sick of HOA harassment. When Don Ellis took the stand and confirmed everything, emails, strategy, Karen's directive, the room got so quiet you could hear people blinking. I locked eyes with her just once. She looked right through me like I wasn't even there. Then she turned to her lawyer and whispered something. He immediately requested a recess. They didn't return. The board's remaining members submitted resignations within 24 hours. The county placed a hold on all HOA activity pending legal review. Kevin Blake was subpoenaed and reportedly fled the state, though later we'd find out he was hiding at his lake house, drinking boxed wine and watching home renovation shows like nothing happened. Karen, on the other hand, lawyered up and went dark. But the damage was done. Our case had gone from gravel versus driveway to fraud versus truth, and the fraud was losing ground by the minute. Back at the farm, Grandpa poured himself a glass of sweet tea, turned on the local news, and watched Karen's face flicker across the screen as the anchor said the word investigation. Then he leaned back in his chair, took a sip, and said, "About damn time." The courtroom smelled like wood polish, stale coffee, and barely contained resentment. It wasn't my first time in a courthouse, but it sure as hell was the first time I'd walked in with a folder full of gravel photos and a GoPro clip of my grandfather politely dumping construction material on a BMW. Linda had warned me not to smile too much. Judges hate smug. Let the facts do the punching. We were the plaintiffs on the docket now, Harper v. Vista Springs HOA, and the courtroom was packed. Not just lawyers and reporters, but residents too. A few from Vista Springs sat stiffly on the right side, arms crossed like they'd been personally betrayed. Others were behind us, quietly supportive. Someone even wore a t-shirt that said notched Team Frank. Karen sat across the aisle, her face a mask of courtroom neutrality, dressed like a political candidate who'd just discovered public backlash. Her lawyer did most of the talking. Ours did most of the damage. Linda opened strong. She laid out the timeline. Letters, gravel, forged documents, attempted rezoning, harassment of an elderly veteran, and reckless endangerment through obstruction of emergency access. Then she played the footage, first the gravel dump, then Grandpa's return trip. The room shifted audibly when the GoPro footage showed him calmly dropping rocks. Not a single scratch left behind. Karen's lawyer objected, of course. Called it irrelevant. The judge disagreed. Then came the witnesses. Don Ellis testified again, this time under oath, with more detail and far less patience. He confirmed Karen's strategic emails, Kevin's manipulation of planning staff, and how they'd discussed pushing older property owners out through attrition tactics. The courtroom buzzed. The judge had to call for silence twice. Next was a zoning official from the county who'd reviewed the altered parcel maps. He confirmed the signature labeled James Harper had no verification, no chain of custody, and looked suspiciously like it was copy-pasted from another digital document. Karen's lawyer tried to pivot, said it was all a misunderstanding, a clerical mistake, that community enthusiasm had run ahead of proper procedure. Then Linda dropped the hammer. She brought in our medical documentation, VA forms showing Grandpa's disability status. Then she walked through the timeline of how access to emergency services was blocked, complete with timestamps, county maps, and phone logs showing Grandpa's doctor had called in concern after Frank missed a check-in. The defense had nothing. When Karen was called to testify, she declined. Her lawyer whispered something, and she stared straight ahead like she was made of wax. That, more than anything, told the judge exactly what she needed to know. Closing arguments came and went. Ours was clean. Theirs was desperate. And then, after what felt like an hour of holding our breath while the judge reviewed her notes, she spoke. The court finds in favor of the plaintiffs. You could hear the exhale across the room. Vista Springs HOA is hereby ordered to pay $150,000 in damages to James and Frank Harper for obstruction, defamation, and intentional misrepresentation. Furthermore, the court recommends referral of the zoning fraud to the district attorney's office for formal investigation. I didn't cheer, didn't smile. I just looked at Grandpa. He gave me the smallest nod I'd ever seen, but his eyes were on fire. We'd won, but somehow I knew this wasn't quite over yet. The judgment came down hard, clean, decisive, and loud enough to echo through every manicured hedge in Vista Springs. The HOA was officially ordered to pay us $150,000 in damages. On top of that, the court slapped them with a separate $300,000 penalty for falsifying zoning documents, money that was going straight to the county. Karen didn't even blink. She just stood there, frozen like a department store mannequin, lips pressed together, jaw tight enough to bend steel. The board disbanded within 48 hours. Karen resigned, effective immediately, citing personal health and safety concerns. Kevin Blake disappeared entirely. Rumor was he fled to Arizona or holed up in a cousin's timeshare in Colorado. And the clubhouse? Shut down, padlocked, and tagged with a bright orange notice from the district attorney's office. I thought that'd be it. Honestly, I figured they'd retreat into their granite countertops and HOA bylaws, lick their wounds, and stew quietly in whatever overpriced wine suburban tyrants drink when their little empires collapse. But Karen wasn't built like that. 3 days after the verdict, I woke up to the smell of smoke. It wasn't the fireplace or the grill or some neighbor burning trash. No, this was thick, acrid, and alive. I threw on jeans, bolted out the door, and found Grandpa already stumbling out of the house with a fire extinguisher in one hand and his boots half on. The fire was at the edge of the property, near the old work shed, where Grandpa kept his rusted-out hay baler, an antique tractor, and enough scrap metal to build a battleship. Flames licked up the side of the shed, crackling along the wooden beams. The air shimmered with heat. We both lunged into action. Frank hit it with the extinguisher while I grabbed the hose and started dousing everything in range. It took 20 minutes to kill the blaze. The shed was scorched. Half the roof caved in, and the tractor, one he hadn't used in years but still called Bessie, was blackened and crumpled like a burned-out corpse. But we stopped it from spreading. Barely. The sheriff came fast, followed by the volunteer fire department. They asked the usual questions. Then I showed them the footage from the back fence camera, the one I installed weeks ago when the first gravel war started. The image was grainy but clear enough. A dark SUV pulling up around 3 a.m., parking just past the ditch line. A figure in a hoodie stepped out, carrying something bulky, gas can most likely, and headed toward the shed. 30 seconds later, fire bloomed. Then the figure turned to leave, Pulled down the hood for just a second, enough for the infrared to catch her face. Karen, no mistake. No wiggle room, same sharp jaw, same hairstyle, same smug, deadpan expression. She hadn't even bothered to cover the license plate. The sheriff's deputy stared at the footage, then nodded grimly. "We'll get a warrant." They found her in a motel 2 towns over, bags still packed, rental car cooling in the parking lot. She didn't resist, didn't speak, just stared through the officers like they were furniture. They cuffed her on the spot. Arson, trespassing, attempted destruction of property, and violating a court ruling. No bond. It hit the news that night. Disgraced HOA president arrested in arson plot. There was a mugshot. Karen in County Orange, looking like someone who just realized the HOA handbook doesn't include a chapter on federal prison. Grandpa didn't say much the rest of the day. He just sat in his lawn chair, facing the wreckage, a cigar smoldering in one hand, shotgun across his lap. Not loaded, just ceremonial. "She always struck me as the type that'd set fire to the rules if she couldn't write 'em," he finally muttered. I nodded, then went inside to start drafting another video. Because the story wasn't just about gravel anymore. Now it was about fire and consequences. A month after Karen's arrest, things finally started to settle. The scorched patch by the old shed was now cordoned off, marked with caution tape and a fading sign from the fire department that read, "Under investigation." Grandpa refused to rebuild it, said some scars are meant to stay visible. "Keeps memory sharp," he told me, tossing a beer cap into the dust. Karen was still in county lockup, awaiting trial on multiple felony counts. The DA tacked on attempted insurance fraud after discovering she'd quietly taken out a rental policy on the Vista Springs maintenance truck, claiming it had been damaged by community retaliation. The judge didn't find that amusing. Her bail was denied a second time. Vista Springs itself, gone. The name was stripped from the county map. The signs came down. The gates were unlocked and left swinging like broken promises. Turns out, when you build a community on lies and power trips, it doesn't survive the sunlight. Grandpa got letters from strangers, real ones, handwritten, veterans, farmers, folks who'd been steamrolled by HOAs or greedy developers. One guy from Arkansas sent a photo of his granddad with a thumbs up and a note that said, "Tell Frank he's a damn legend." I framed that one and hung it in the hallway. As for me, I finally did something I'd been thinking about for weeks. I launched a YouTube channel called Don't Gravel My Drive. First video, a full breakdown of the Vista Springs saga. I narrated it straight, no theatrics, just raw facts, clips from our security cameras, court records, and the now legendary GoPro footage of Grandpa's slow-motion revenge. It exploded. 1 million views in a week. 2, then 5. People reached out from across the country asking for advice, support, or just to say thank you. I started doing weekly uploads, topics like how to spot an illegal easement scam, what HOA boards hope you never read, and my personal favorite, when Grandpa brings a loader to a paper fight. I didn't expect it to turn into something real, but it did. Sponsors came, legal advocates reached out, even a few civil liberties orgs wanted to collaborate. Turns out people were hungry to push back. They just needed someone to show them it was possible. Grandpa didn't care much about the online part. He watched a few videos, grunted his approval, then went back to tinkering with an old rototiller he swore could still outrun a Prius. But he came to the meet and greet I hosted in town, wore his best flannel, shook hands with everyone, and signed. A kid's toy dump truck with a Sharpie. "Keep your gravel where it belongs," he wrote. That evening, we sat on the porch, the sun low and lazy behind the trees, everything golden and still. He poured us 2 glasses of sweet tea and raised his in a silent toast. "You did good, Jimmy," he said. "Didn't let 'em roll you. Your folks would be proud." I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodded, and looked out over the property. Our land. Still here. Still ours. The last thing Grandpa did before heading inside was nail up a fresh wooden sign at the edge of the drive. Private property. No dumping. No trespassing. No bullshit. Beneath it, in smaller letters, it read, "Violators will be returned to sender. Loader optional. Damn right."